Hey everybody, this is David Hood and Grayson Mann with TigerNet. You can see on the clock behind us that it's really late in the morning. We're back here in Tallahassee at the Airbnb we're staying at. And of course, if you were watching tonight, Clemson walks out of Doak Campbell with a 29-13 victory over Florida State. Me, that score notable just because the last time I heard it, 29-13, Clemson beat South Carolina 29-13 in 1981 to advance to the Orange Bowl in their first ever national title. So could a national title be in the offing for the Tigers? We'll see. But Grayson, yeah, a lot of people will say this one was not pretty. It was ugly. It was workmanlike. There's a lot of words that you can say. Uh, but with the upsets that we saw in college football today, you go home with a win.
Yeah, really crazy weekend. I mean, you have I think six teams in the top 12 pending the result of Miami tonight with the woke agenda of Cal potentially prevailing again.
The algorithm.
That's right.
Love
So
the algorithm.
I think when you look at tonight, it was a game where I think many fans looked at this road trip for a lot of reasons, whether it was the DJ reunion, whether it was they wanted to see Klubnik on the road. Has that improved as well? And I think at least my main takeaway is, and we talked about it in the car a little bit, is that you sort of know what you got in this FSU offense with Brock Glenn. It is a
Mhm.
little anemic. It's all over the place. There's a little bit more of a punch to it than what Uiagalelei was able to serve. But I think Clemson realized once they're up 17-0 and that fast start once again paving the way, they've outscored opponents 90-0 in their last four victories. So clearly there's some separation here that they can work from.
So after that 17-0 lead, Clemson didn't score an offensive touchdown. In fact, they attempted six field goals after that, a record seven attempts tonight. That is a Clemson football record. Field goal attempts for Nolan Hooser. And Clemson, yeah, that last touchdown, they didn't throw a pass in the fourth quarter. 500 yards of total offense, but just the two touchdowns. It was pretty obvious watching them from the second quarter on that when they got in the red zone, the offense just went very conservative. We're going to throw behind the sticks, not beyond the sticks. We're going to let him kick and let it go. And I call that reminiscent of the 16-7 victory
Yep.
over South Carolina last year, a Dabo Swinney special.
And you realize what you have in that South Carolina offense, where that they honestly had more talent than what FSU had on the field offensively tonight with Spencer
Probably.
Rattler, Leggett. So there was a lot they had to work with. But I think for Clemson, we talked to Cade about just sort of starting fast, and he said that it's so essential to what this team's trying to do on the road. I mean, last year you look at games like these being once you really hold your breath for, once it was about 17-0, even 10-0 at one point, I thought,
Mhm.
okay, there's a formula to this. And I think with Klubnik and co, if we could just talk about two's performance really quick, I thought there was more poise in the pocket.
Mhm.
It was a rocky night for a lot, but there's some drops. There's some miscommunication, I think, on route concepts that are
Yeah.
going to get cleaned up in film. But I was watching him in the pocket, surveying the field, not quick to escape. But when he did, it mattered. And I think that that added element's going to continue to grow. And when teams study tape for Clemson, they're going to have to account somebody to spy on too, and that's going to open up things for them future wise.
Well, let's face it, we really wanted to see what he did on the road because he wasn't very good on the road last year. And we know what we saw against Georgia, even though that was neutral site, right? With all the Georgia fans there. So you really wanted to see what he does on the road. And I turned to Nikki there in the second quarter and I said, I think Clemson's got a quarterback. I really do. I think he's good. You wouldn't trade him for a whole lot of people in the country right now, the way he's playing. And I'm a little disappointed. Sure, I wish they would have relied on him a little bit more, leaned on him a little bit more. I think when it got kind of into crunch time, you saw Stellato out on the field because maybe he's the better blocking wide receiver. Cole Turner was out there a lot with Antonio. So Tyler Brown not out there as much. TJ Moore not out there as much. Bryant Wesco not out there as much. So they just kind of put some of the older guys out there and said, go get them. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, and you look at sort of how much blocking has played a role in this offense and the sort of the identity and its growth is that the details for last year, they got a little bit on the wayside. They're starting to matter more for this team. So shifting the defense. And you came out and Nikki and I were with player interviews that you'll see on TigerNet on YouTube when you watch this podcast as well, when you want some context, is they were ticked off. I mean, Avion Terrell was asked sort of, he gave his quick assessment, was we played okay. And so we tried to pry that comment a little further open. So what do you think about that? He goes, I'm not going to talk about it. And just very agitated, I would say. I think this is going to be a team that's going to watch the film on Sunday when they get back. They're going to be some butt chewings, as Barrett Carter described it. at the halftime against Stanford, and you're going to rebound and get to Wake Forest. But overall, 13 points on the road. Can't ask for much more.
No, the 120 point or 120 total yards through three quarters, and then they gave up 130 in the fourth. Florida State ran 25 plays for that 130 yards in the fourth quarter. That's a lot of plays. And you kind of felt like maybe that first string defense was getting just a little bit tired. Peter Woods was back. I thought that he was okay. Gimpy.
Felt like he was on a snap count.
Yeah, kind of gimpy looking at times. Jaheim Lawson out there taking snaps. AJ Hoffler. And of course, Peter Woodson had to step in for Vic Burley, who, remember, he got knocked down on one of those field goal blocks. And then he gave up another one, or at least it looked like it might be him. Peter Woods went out there and replaced him. So things to clean up. Yeah, I think that probably the word going to be this week again is finish. The offense didn't finish drives in the red zone, whether that was kind of on purpose or not. The defense didn't finish great again, and special teams really needs to finish well.
Yeah, the blocking of special teams, I think particularly on the left side, was an issue tonight. Certainly going to be players that we'll touch on in pieces on TigerNet. We're going to touch on plenty of things from this, but it's another matchup that Clemson lost last year. Florida State, it was NC State 2 weeks ago. They're starting to reclaim certain territory that they held pretty proudly in that dominant stretch. And I think something that I wrote, there's some characteristics of a championship team that they're starting to form. I don't think they've formed it yet, but I think perspective, when you're watching the Clemson game, if you're a fan, you're in a bubble, you're like in a little, it's like you're a mime in a square. You're not moving out. And then when you turn your phone to ESPN, you see Michigan lost, USC lost, Alabama lost. You probably watched that. Miami might lose at the timing of this when this all gets finished and edited. Another team, Tennessee, drops. You probably go 16 points. It was one of those weird weekends in college football where you sort of feel it in the air. That's what makes the sport so special. I think when Clemson fans look back on the season and they go 16-point win in Tallahassee, despite the struggles they've had, I think they'll take it.
They will take it. Who knows what's going to happen with the polls? I think a lot of times some of these SEC teams, it just means more, and they get, hey, you lost to Vanderbilt, but it was in the SEC, so you get to rise, whatever. Clemson will be whatever they are. I think next week at Wake Forest is interesting. They will be big favorites yet again, but Wake Forest with a win at NC State after being down in the fourth quarter. So maybe they're starting to find a little something with their quarterback. I do want to add this. I was coming out of Doak Campbell Stadium and I ran into Terrence Moore and Alexander Moore, TJ Moore's parents. They were really happy. TJ's dad said that he had chill bumps and was jumping up and down when TJ scored on that little tunnel screen. And he said, man, that was just pretty. It was really pretty. But they wanted to thank everybody in Clemson Nation for what's happened. I think that GoFundMe for their house that they lost, well up over $60,000. They are headed home tomorrow morning early to try and find an apartment to get into, to have some place, as they call it, safe, because there's another hurricane bearing down on the same spot. But I thought it was interesting. Terrence, he looked at me, shook my hand, and he said, there's a reason we chose Clemson, and now that Clemson's come through, the family's come through, we know that TJ's in the right place. And he kind of maybe hinted that some other teams are already starting to come after him, but TJ's home, and I thought that was great.
Yeah, it's one of those moments this week, and it feels like since last Thursday, there's been a different air in Clemson, and just people are trying to recover. There are still people, I believe, without power at this point. So Duke Energy's working towards that chart, I believe. And so to see the community rally, I think you and I both posted on Twitter, had something up on TigerNet about just, if you can, donate, it's still open. And it's just great to see one of those stories. What makes college football so special is there is that familial feel to it. And we saw that on full display tonight. David, any more final thoughts on the Seminoles before we turn the page to the Demon Deacons?
No, on to the Demon Deacons. Let's go up to, I guess it's still BB&T Field, Winston-Salem. If you're a Clemson fan, there's all that parking across the street. Understand that the fair is going to be going on. So make sure you get there early and get into that parking lot. But we'll see what the Demon Deacons have to offer. They're on a long losing streak to the Tigers. And for Clemson, second week in a row on the road, kind of maybe an outmatched opponent. I'm going to see what they've got. Really do.
2-game road test. We'll have more of that on TigerNet. We also want to thank our sponsors, Herb Tyler, Chick-fil-A, Lisa Nason, and Nason Accounting. Just continue to support what we do and make this possible. Right. We really appreciate that. And we really appreciate your time. If you've listened all this way and you haven't yet, feel free to subscribe and follow us on Spotify and just continue to do what you guys do. That's so incredible. Guys, thank you so much. If you were making the trip to Tallahassee, drive home safe and take care, and we'll be in touch. Have a good one.